Hi everyone, this is Mr. Zoeller and I'm here to present a screencast video today on the Kansas-Nebraska Act and bleeding Kansas. And our first objective we'll be looking at is what are the causes and effects of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So for the Kansas-Nebraska Act, this is going to be a law passed by Congress 4 years after the Compromise of 1850. So this was passed in 1854. And the main reason why this law is being passed is we're going to have Stephen Douglas, a senator from Illinois, who is attempting to get a transcontinental railroad built through California, and he thought the best way of doing that was to reorganize the rest of the Louisiana territory into two territories, and that would speed along the process of getting that railroad built through there. And he also owned land in this area too, so he's hoping to get the railroad to go through his land. And so the Nebraska territory is going to be divided into two halves. The northern half would be Nebraska, and the southern half would be Kansas. And the whole idea behind this law when it comes to slavery, is slavery going to be allowed or not? Well, originally under the Missouri Compromise, so this 3630 line here, remember that any states added north of this line that are part of the Louisiana Territory would be free, which means no slavery allowed. And then any added south of it would allow slavery. And so this law, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, is going to oversee and cancel out the Missouri Compromise. Since in this law it is now based on popular sovereignty, which means the people are sovereign. The people have the power. So let the people living in Kansas vote if they would like to allow slavery or not, and allow the people in Nebraska to do the same. And so this is going to violate the Missouri Compromise, obviously, since both territories are north of the line, so they should have been free. But now it's going to be up to the people living in those areas to vote if they want to have slavery or not. So that's going to cause some problems. So the Kansas and Nebraska territories both border Missouri, which is a slave state. And since it's based on votes in the territories, we're going to have northerners crossing into Kansas and southerners crossing into Kansas to sway the vote to make Kansas either a free territory or a slave territory. And that's going to lead to a number of bloody events that are going to happen. This is what we call bleeding Kansas. So in the summer of 1856, we're going to have some pro-slavery, which means people that supported slavery are going to storm into Lawrence, Kansas, which was the capital of the anti-slavery government there in Kansas. They burned down a hotel, destroyed a number of buildings, and people were hurt. And for the pro-slavery forces, they saw this as a victory. So you can see down here any of the green battle sites here are victories for the pro-slavery forces. And then in response, a few days later, in Powhatan Creek, which is a pro-slavery area, we're going to have some abolitionists and people against slavery led by John Brown, who is a radical abolitionist. And so he and about 9 other men, including 4 of his sons, they take 5 men out of their homes in Powhatan Creek who believe these 5 men are responsible as supporters of slavery. And in front of their homes, they take out broadswords and then they chop them up into pieces. They kill them in front of their whole families. And so this whole idea of bleeding Kansas, this bloody events going on, is definitely bloody when you have people being chopped up with swords. It's just something you don't hear about or see about in that time period or even today anymore. So that is going to lead to more and more attacks happening in Kansas. And so over 1856 and a few years later, there's going to be over 600 people that are being killed in Kansas. And so we call this event Bleeding Kansas. And you can see the dates, a lot of them happening in the summer. So I'm sure the heat, humidity, the anger going on there is all kind of coming together. So let's look a little bit more here at Bleeding Kansas and what's happening there. So you can see in this picture here some different weapons that people are using. And the main objective you should know is that students, you should be able to summarize what were the causes of Bleeding Kansas and what events took place during it. So as I was mentioning earlier, when Kansas applied to join the Union, the United States, the people in the territory were allowed to vote to decide whether slavery would be legal or not. So that's called popular sovereignty. Pro-slavery, which means people that are in favor of slavery groups, rushed supporters into Kansas from other parts of the South, especially Missouri next door, to vote for pro-slavery legislatures for the government. And then those legislatures, which are the people that make the laws, then pass laws making it a crime to question slavery or help fugitive slaves. So they're doing whatever they can in Kansas to make it that slavery is allowed. On the other hand, we're also going to have other people that are coming into Kansas that are anti-slavery, which means that they're against slavery, and they create their own separate legislature, their own separate government, and that would be in the town of Lawrence. So what's going to end up happening is the pro-slavery legislature, the ones that are in favor of slavery, they're going to charge the leaders of the other group in Lawrence with treason against the government, and then try to have them arrested in the town of Lawrence, Kansas. And so the leaders of the anti-slavery government end up fleeing and running away, but the pro-slavery force decided to attack the town. One man's killed, hotels destroyed, and other buildings are set on fire and damaged. And we're going to have, in response, anti-slavery Kansans are now going to attack the pro-slavery groups, and just going to be bloodshed back and forth of people against and in favor of slavery killing one another in Kansas. And so when we look back, this is basically a preview, a mini civil war that's going on in Kansas. And this is what the rest of the American Civil War is going to end up looking like, is Americans killing Americans for different reasons. And so over the next few years in Kansas, we're going to have around 600 people that were killed on both sides. And so we call this time period in Kansas Bleeding Kansas, because literally people are being killed. There's blood everywhere. So let's go ahead and watch this video here about Bleeding Kansas.
Ordinary people are outraged by the new law. Abolitionist newspapers and literature spread like wildfire. Published in 1852, Uncle Tom's Cabin becomes the best-selling book of the century after the Bible. A passionate anti-slavery novel written by Harriet Beecher Stowe, an unknown housewife from Connecticut. It mainly appeals to women who are becoming politicized for the first time. Slavery is the burning issue of the day. As America expands across the continent, North and South face off over each new territory. Will it be slave-owning or free?
The Northerners began to see that, wait a minute, they're not going to keep slavery just in the South. They want to take slavery west and to turn the country into a slave country.
Americans from all over the country are flooding into the new territories on the frontier. Each becomes a battleground. Will it be slave-owning or free? It comes to a head in Kansas. A peaceful protest turns violent. Emotions run high. Towns are terrorized. Stores robbed. Homesteads burned. North and South are polarized. Neither side will back down.
So we're going to have violence that's happening in Kansas, and now we're also going to have violence taking place in the Capitol in Washington, D.C., in the Senate chamber. So what's going to end up happening is Charles Sumner, who is from the North, and he is one of the heads of the Republican Party, gives a passionate speech against what's happening in Bleeding Kansas, against slavery, and he ends up poking fun and making fun of some Southerners. And so Preston Brooks, who is a pro-slavery representative in the House of Representatives, comes to defend the honor of his cousin that Charles Sumner had ridiculed and said was basically sleeping in bed with slavery. And he comes to Charles Sumner on the Senate floor, and he takes his metal-tipped cane and he bashes in Charles Sumner's head on the floor of the Senate. And so a friend of Preston Brooks, Representative Lawrence Kite's there, stopping the other senators from helping Sumner by threatening him with a pistol. And Brooks ends up breaking his cane in the attack, and so supporters throughout the South will send him thousands of new ones. So Charles Sumner here, you can see his injuries on his forehead right here. He is going to be hospitalized for a number of years since he was severely injured in these attacks. And then Preston Brooks was never able to be voted out by the Congress for his actions, and he ends up going back down south to South Carolina, where he's given thousands of new canes to replace the ones that he had lost. And he even gets reelected to the House of Representatives because of his actions here. So we have violence taking place in Kansas. Now we have violence taking place in the House and the Senate, in Congress, and we're going to have members of Congress coming to meetings armed with their pistols. So they're not sure if something like this will happen again. And here's another picture showing of the attack here on Charles Sumner as he's just sitting at his desk. A couple days, this is after he gave his speech that Preston Brooks didn't like. And then Preston Brooks later challenges another congressman to a duel, but he didn't expect this congressman to accept, and he ends up running away and chickening out. So I guess he wasn't able to fight everybody that was in the Congress. So this is the end of the video. I want you to go ahead and pause right now and answer questions 8 through 14 down below. And if you're not able to answer any of these questions, make sure to go back and search for those answers in this video. So this is Mr. Zoeller. Have a great day. I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.